Baby, CreepTime the podcast is going on tour and coming to a city near you.
So head over to creeptime.com to get your tickets to come see CreepTime live.
Well, you can't trust County.
Wow, is this an intimidating case?
Whale. Whale, baby.
What is kind of wild about this story, actually, and why I partially had the idea to do it, is we covered this story on Strange and Suspicious. I don't know if that's why I was asking you when we got on. Do you
God.
maybe remember this story?
I might. If you start talking about it, I might come back to me. I never watched. There were a couple episodes I didn't watch or I didn't get. So
And the truth comes out.
and the truth
creepers.
comes out. Baby,
And there
I
it
did
is.
try. I did try to watch at least.
To be fair, it was a full 20 episode season that was shot. But yeah, we first covered this on Strange and Suspicious, and I even remember it on the show, how divisive it was. That was the one big takeaway, and I think that has carried through to the very end of the case, because now this has seen its way through to a trial, which I will get into at the very end of this, and the results might shock you. But it's possibly one of the most recent cases that we have ever covered on this show, because this took place in 2022.
Oh my God. Okay.
Can't think of another story that we've done that has been in that timeline, but I am gonna have everybody pad their ass for this one and strap in, because
I'm like,
there is an insane amount of detail to this timeline that I'm gonna have to go through piece by piece to really tell this story. And I will caveat that it is impossible to boil all of this in to like one singular episode. I mean, this is
Mhm.
like condensing a 2-month opening statement in court into like one podcast episode with how much detail there is. So if there is something that I miss, do know that it is deliberate, because I could not find something to say that it is 100% fact.
yeah.
There is a lot of rumor, there is a lot of circumstantial suggestion surrounding this case. I will try to present the facts as cold as they are on both sides of the aisle, because as I said, this is a case that will divide people, including the creepers.
Mm.
So let's just dive into the top line and discuss what the hell we're going to get into.
Okay. Oh my God.
Ooh.
Hold on. Let me I'm like, should I have caffeine right now? I'm not quite sure, but I need something.
We should have something, maybe a chamomile
You know
at
what?
least.
Can I just also say one thing before you start, that for sure it's going to be, I mean, I don't know the case, but whatever it is, it will just be inherently divisive because it's only been 2 years. We don't have the full context like we get with so many more of our older cases where there's
Mhm.
been a lot of time to do more research. Like you're just, like you said, the cold hard facts.
Well, that's very true. That is exactly true. That it's a lot has happened in those 2 years, though, I must say, because as I said, this has seen its way through to a trial. So they've laid all their cards out on both
Yeah.
sides. So I think it's divisive because it stands with how much weight you give the evidence that's presented,
Mm,
because it's strange on both sides.
mm.
And that's kind of what we're here to discuss today. Why one side doesn't make sense and why the other side also maybe doesn't make sense.
Mm.
So let me set the stage for everybody who is listening. Hello, babies. Thought I had acrylics for a second. So
You're right here.
this is what we're going to get into from a bird's eye view. I will dissect every detail I can of this story. In the early morning hours of January 29th, 2022, Karen Reed, who you'll have a picture of, that's the first picture I sent you. These will also be on Reddit. She had been out to drop off John, her boyfriend, John O'Keefe, at a party. This is Officer John O'Keefe. Our story centralizes around county.
Mhm.
She then woke up in her bed the following morning, roughly before 5 a.m., to the surprise that John was not there. Never came home from the night before. Remember that. So she ended up checking her phone. She ended up getting out of bed. She went to go see his niece because he lived with his niece and nephew. They both lived with him. And she was unnerved when she checked her phone that there were no texts from John. There were no calls. No idea where he could be, unless maybe assuming that he had stayed at the party. So according to the story that investigators have led with, Karen contacted 2 acquaintances, one of which was from that home. She was, I believe, the sister of the homeowner, who was a sergeant. Everybody in this home, pretty much at this party, small intimate party, was within the police force, pretty much, or related to the homeowner, Sergeant Brian Albert. So she ends up contacting these two acquaintances that she knew from the inner circle, and one of them, like I said, was Jennifer McCabe, sister of the homeowner, and the other was Carrie Roberts, who agreed to go back with her to the location of the party on Fairview Road to look for John, because Karen just starts panicking. I believe she even said something. She was like, "Oh my God, do you think he could have fallen? What if a snowplow hit him? Like anything could have happened in the middle of the night." Also remember that for later on. So all three of them are in a car, and upon their arrival to Fairview Road, they pulled up onto this snowy street because this is in the middle of a morning blizzard, and they're inching towards the area where Karen last left John, where they found him lying flat in the snow, his frozen, lifeless, bloody body facing straight up. And Karen shrieked, and the entire group went hysterical as they ran to his corpse, attempting to revive him. But in a twist of events, and as a very mysterious couple of days unfolded with this scene, swarms of cops, of investigators, a forensics team, many people were absolutely floored when it was Karen herself who was arrested and accused of murdering her boyfriend, John O'Keefe. There is so much more to this story and this mystery, but that is the top line overview of what we are going to get into. Immediate thoughts.
Oh, shoot. Well, I knew when you said remember that about her saying it looked like a snowplow could have gotten him.
It's thou doth protest too much.
Remind me, where are we? We're somewhere cold.
We are actually in Massachusetts, in Canton, Massachusetts.
Okay.
Yes. And
okay. Oh, well, that's kind of interesting in the context of police. Only because I just imagine, I feel like that's got to be near like Boston-ish area.
And he certainly was a 16-year veteran of the Boston PD.
Okay. Because I don't know much, but I feel like that's probably a pretty intense police force.
It is known to be. And I should say, like all major police forces, there are lots of seeds and accusations of corruption, which I think is important in the context of how we view this case with like an icy eye, kind of, to say like, who do we trust? Whose story is the correct story? But it's interesting what you're latching onto immediately and what you're holding on to with Karen, because what I'm going to get into on the other side is just as damning, in my opinion.
Well,
there's a
just
lot.
from
Did that
the
hit
visual,
you like a ton of bricks? Can I ask?
Yeah. Well, and also it's rare that, because Creepers Silas gave me a bunch of different pictures to look at, like one by one this time. So it was weird as I was looking at her face in that courtroom. It was kind of like I was looking at a portrait of her in a museum or something as you were describing what was happening, and I was just like, oh,
It's
God.
funny you say that. I literally wrote in my notes, I said, of all the cases that we cover that are like semi-recent, or they're still kind of like in this gray area where people aren't really sure where to lean, I believe this is a case that will go down in history. This is one of those cases, and I'm getting too far ahead of myself. I can't talk about the end of this just yet.
Don't let me push you.
But yeah, I deliberately wanted to send you only singular pictures of each person, because I almost don't want you to get an early judgment or sense for each of them to say like, I'm getting a vibe from this person. I just want you to coldly look at each person involved in this story and then make your assessment based on the evidence in black and white. So I am going to get all of this packaged up into one cohesive story for everybody. But before we do, let's take a quick break. Let's say welcome back to the Creepers.
Hi, Creepers.
Oh my
Happy
God,
Friday.
babies. Happy Friday. We are less than 45 days away from tour starting March 1st.
Oh my God. That's so crazy. Me back to LA, baby.
I know.
My second little home at this point.
I know. I keep imploring you. I was thinking last night, I was like, I wonder if she's got that travel credit card yet. I doubt it.
Well, crickets. Baby, I've been thinking about it. I've been shopping around. I'm looking at the points guy. I'm like,
the points guy. Whoa, throwback.
I know. Oh,
that
yeah,
used to
for
be
you, especially the points guy is a throwback.
That used to be like a competitor at work. Wow. And he's so, I think it's just like truly like a team of one who like runs that
I think
situation.
it is. I think it's a literal guy that like posts on that blog.
That's so crazy that he was like inching his way into the conversation as like a competitor with like Fortune 500
Yeah.
companies like Credit Karma and whatnot. And it was like, whoa, damn.
Oh my God.
But yes, I'm very excited that everybody is back for a Friday episode. If you are brand new here, welcome. My name is Silas and this is Stu, and we are your hosts of CreepTime the podcast, baby.
And you're now a creeper if you're new. Just by listening to those first
If you
5
haven't
minutes.
clicked off already. But again, please make sure to stick around, take a moment right now to follow and subscribe to the show. You can also like it. You can hit the bell notification. That way you easily get a notification every time we drop a brand new episode. And if you feel so implored and you want to suggest a case that you do want to hear on here, whether you're a new creeper or an established creeper,
Mm.
you can do so in the comments, I believe, on YouTube, Spotify. We check those a lot, or CreepTime the podcast on Reddit.
Mm-hmm.
And we should also say, thank you to everybody who continues to spread the word of Creep Time. Everybody who has shared this show and kind of roped in a friend, a family member, or a coworker, or even just like if you put it on Reddit or you put it online, that is immensely helpful to growing this show. It is so appreciated, believe me, by Stu and I. So thank you again so much, and consider doing so if you haven't tried already. It gets these stories out to more people.
Yes. Thank y'all so much. And also get a buddy roped in. So if we come to your city on tour someday, you got somebody to come with.
I know. Yeah. If you haven't gotten your tickets, like we mentioned before, 45 days away, less than. So if you want to get your tickets to come see Creep Time live at any of the Western dates, head over to creeptime.com. And one other thing I wanted to mention here very quickly, and we will get through this fast, but I do just want to give a quick note of appreciation from me for everybody who has reached out about the fires
Mm.
in Los Angeles. Thank you so much. I am entirely safe. I am perfectly okay in my spot. I only had one fire that was somewhat close to me, and that got a little scary. There was only one evacuation notice that was close to my area, but I am okay. I'm back in my spot. I've got my air purifier cranked up, and I'm doing all right. So thank you so much to everybody who reached out.
Yeah, we're so glad you're safe.
Me too.
And I had so many creepers in my DMs asking if you were okay too.
Oh my God.
So they really were, scared, just as scared as I was.
No,
I'm
I
so
wish I'd
glad
put
you're
out
safe.
more messaging to let people know that I'm okay, and I am okay, and everything. It's been a very dystopian and strange week, and I did want to mention that in the bottom of this episode, in the description, I do think that we will include a list of different resources of ways that you can help, that you can donate, whether it's your time, whether it's a monetary contribution, or physical items that you wanted to donate towards the relief. And on a personal note, some of you might have seen this on my story, but I do have a couple of close friends, Ivan and Ashley, you might have read about, who unfortunately lost almost everything
Mm.
in this fire. And a lot of you actually don't know that. You might know Ivan because Ivan helped co-produce the theme song for Creep Time the podcast. He was instrumental in helping to create that. So I've known him and Ashley for years at this point, and the thought that they not only lost their home, but it's more than the keepsakes, than the memories, than the family heirlooms. They kind of lost their livelihoods because Ivan is a musician who works at home and produces at home. It's computers, it's recording equipment, it's instruments, a guitar collection, it's everything, if you can
Mhm.
imagine. So, on a personal note, it's been devastating to just see them try to figure out how to process that everything is gone while simultaneously having to, at warp speed, figure out how do I get back up on my feet? How do I even start to try to work again, to try to rebuild a home again? So I do think that we will include a link to a GoFundMe that's been set up for them. If you are able to, if you feel inclined to, and you would like to donate, that will be down below as well. And thank you so much to anybody who already has from my story. They are immensely grateful, as am I. Very, very appreciative.
Yes. Oh, it's because you know what? It is more than just things. It is identity when you lose everything. So
There's
yeah,
nothing else your mind can't do anything else but try to figure out how to rebuild and navigate getting back up on your feet, let alone work. And they're getting married in May as well. Like this was just a really difficult year for them, and this seemed just really, really awful to happen to
yeah.
such good people. I just felt so terrible when I found out that they'd lost everything, and they didn't even get an evac notice from what I remember. It happened so fast in up in Altadena that I believe they were just home and somebody came banging on their door and said, "You have to get out."
Oh my god.
Which even when I got an evac notice, I at least had time to like take a second, figure out what I was going to pack, what are my most important things to take in terms of documents, in terms of like family stuff. They had no time.
Yeah.
They took the dog and they just got out.
And creepers, I mean, on a little bit of like a just positive note, I feel like if you can be so, so grateful for if you don't live somewhere like LA where that's always kind of the possibility, just maybe extending, yeah, to Ivan and Ashley or any of the different links that we'll put in the description. But I do kind of believe karmically when you kind of give back in the world, it helps you and protects you a little bit from, things coming back to you in a bad way and just doing that when you are in a position where you can be grateful for not having to go through that. I think if you feel so inclined, it's a good thing.
And do know that it is very, very much appreciated by everybody in Los Angeles who is suffering through this. There are a lot of homes that are gone, a lot of people that are displaced, that are displaced, and animals that are displaced. So anything that anyone can do, again, whether it's your time, a monetary donation, or physical items, it is very, very much appreciated. So thank you guys. Heavy note to shift into another heavy story.
Heavy to other heavy.
With that said, let's get into it.
Let's do it.
Let's unpack this case and let's go down the rabbit hole. So I debated on how much backstory I was actually going to give you about Karen and John O'Keefe. These are the two people that we will focus on for the majority of this, Karen Reed and John O'Keefe. I am going to give you very, very slim details on their backstory because I think we need to focus the majority of our time getting into the meat of this story and the timeline. So this is what we know. We've got these two people, John and Karen. John O'Keefe III, John J. O'Keefe III, otherwise known to his friends as JJ, sometimes known as Johnny, was born December 8th, 1975, and he grew up in Braintree, Massachusetts. He eventually went on to college age, where I believe he attended Northwestern University, and then he went on and he got his master's degree in criminal justice at UMass. And a lot of people may not know this. There are some outlets that omit it, which I think is a little bizarre, but John had suffered a very very upsetting personal tragedy years ago, where I believe it was his sister who died tragically, and then shortly after, her husband also died,
Mm.
leaving their two kids orphaned. So John had actually taken in his niece and nephew and had been raising them in his home for the last 8 years, I believe, 7 or 8 years.
Oh, wow.
And I had assumed that his sister had died with the husband tragically in an accident or something. It actually wasn't like that at all. She had been diagnosed with a brain tumor, from what I read, and died within 6 months of her diagnosis. And then months after her death, her husband died of a heart attack,
Oh my
which
gosh.
sometimes you do see.
That does
Like there
happen.
are
Yeah.
spouses or close family members that die within a short window of each other.
Yeah. I mean, it's not a heart attack, but I think of what is it, broken heart syndrome,
Hmm.
where like something it just is the stress on your cardiovascular system that can make that happen. Oh God.
I think there might even be some evidence to support that there's truth to that. But that's the thing that I saw omitted. And I just wanted to include that one piece if I wasn't going to go too deep into his backstory to at least make a comment on some of his character, because he did
Mhm.
have another brother who I will not blame, but I will also say did not take in those kids. It was John who took them in. And the last thing I guess to mention is that John is also, as you realized, a police officer for the Boston PD. He is a 16-year veteran. So, shifting over to Karen. Karen was born in 1980, so she's a little bit younger than John, but I should mention that at this point, they were both in their 40s. And she was also raised in Mass, but I also read that she was raised for part of her childhood in Virginia as well. Not exactly sure how long she was there before she returned to Massachusetts. She also had a master's degree, but she had a master's degree in finance. So at this point in her life, she was working as a financial analyst for Fidelity Investments, and she had been there since 2007. And she was an adjunct professor at Bentley University, which was the same place she received her bachelor's.
Hmm.
At the time of this mystery, John and Karen, I believe, had been dating since 2020, so a true like COVID relationship, and they did live together with the niece and nephew. All of them were in the house, which we'll also reference back to because the niece and nephew, once interviewed, might be able to shed some light on what the nature of their relationship was. So before we jump into any of this timeline, just since I've given you like a brief overview of their backstory, any initial thoughts on either of them, or do you not have one opinion one way or the other just yet?
Well, I mean, there's a lot of moving parts here. Well, first of all, my first thought was like they both sound like they've got intelligent backgrounds, I guess. I mean, Northwestern, that's a pretty
Hmm.
incredible school to go to. So I'm kind of putting that together just in terms of like if it's a she said and his family said situation or what this might grow into. I'm downloading that about them. And then also I guess the COVID relationship, I think that's kind
Hmm.
of telling. Um and then the mix of having, his family in the house and they're not even her, stepkids. They're also like his niece and nephew. So it's even like one further degree of kind
Hmm.
of like not feeling that tie. So I don't know. I have no idea what any of that like how it's gonna correlate, but just kind of a lot of moving parts, I feel like.
And granted, that's a good point too to bring up the niece and nephew and just think about how displaced they were, even just being there because they had lost both of their parents. So to introduce not only a new sort of like familial parental figure being John, in addition to John's girlfriend who lives there, it could probably create some kind of dynamic that is hard to navigate, I'd imagine, for kids.
Yeah, and
Like tough to get
especially
through.
yeah, and as a pretty new couple. I mean, they've only been together for 2 years at that point.
Yeah, and one other thing to mention about that from the COVID relationship of it all, I mean, people who got together during COVID, a lot of people survived the arc of that relationship, but a lot of people found themselves at odds with each other because
Mhm.
COVID created a very specific and unique circumstance for couples to bond and get together. And then once the fabric of that started to go away and things started to return to something that looked normal, maybe the relationship never had a good foundation.
Yeah.
And I think maybe that's where some of the fighting, as we would learn, started to come from with
Mm,
John and Karen.
mm.
So, with all that said, what is our timeline? We are going to break this down. Stay with me because it is going to get dicey.
Okay.
Whoa. I'll give the best detail that I can. And I will say before I get into it for you, Stu, and the creepers, keep an open mind
Okay.
because whatever occurred on this night, it is definitively homicide. The question is Karen a killer or is this a frame job? So on the night of January 28th, 2022, this is a very cold Friday in Canton, Mass, one night before a blizzard is going to roll in the morning. It was supposed to be kind of a casual night, maybe like a date night even, and according to the sequence of the timeline and the nights that unfolded, the plan was that Karen and John were going to go out and hit a couple of bars together, and after the bars, there was loosely a plan that developed that they were going to meet up with some of John's acquaintances from the police department. It should be noted that John did not personally know the homeowner. So says the homeowner, Brian Albert, the sergeant. They only lightly knew each other through the work sphere. It was actually Sergeant Brian Albert's sister who seemed to know John a bit better and had extended the invite. So I read. So the evening started, according to Karen's story, which was confirmed by surveillance footage at around 7:37 p.m. This is when she roughly knew, and the footage could confirm that John arrived at C.D. McCarthy's in Canton, which is a very well-known bar and restaurant. And he's going there because some of the people who were going to be at this after party are already at the bar. So it's kind of like meeting up and like sitting close to work acquaintances, but it's going to
Mm.
be a night of heavy drinking. By 8:51 p.m., more than an hour after he arrived, this is when Karen walks through the door. We see this on camera and she meets him and says hello to everybody. I can't confirm this if she drank all of these, but according to the timeline that I found on WCVB, which is a very well known Boston news outlet, Karen was handed something like 5 glasses of wine from the
Mm.
bartender, um, and potentially a shot or two at this one bar. And this was over the course of 2 hours, I will say, that they were there drinking and sort of dining. And it's unclear if she was maybe passing some of these to John or passing them to the other people they were with, but it is assumed that she was drinking quite a bit. And then if we move a little bit further in the timeline, the two leave this bar at exactly 10:41 p.m. We see them walk out of the door. They then end up going to a different bar. This is called the Waterfall Bar and Grill, which is also in Canton, not far away at all. And they walked in at 10:54 p.m. And again, more people who were going to be at this after party allegedly are also with them at that bar. They remained there and they drank until after midnight when we see them leave this bar together right around 12:10 to maybe like 12:11, and then by 12:14 John sends a text to his friend, the sister of the homeowner, and says where to, asking like where do we go, where's the after party.
Mhm.
Sister of the homeowner followed up and she shared the address, which was on Fairview Road. I will omit the actual house number, but this was on Fairview Road. And she says, come here. And then by 12:15, the two are seen traveling in Karen's SUV. It's Karen who's driving in the direction of the home. A period of time would pass before they're actually really within the vicinity. This is when things get a little murky in both timelines. But they are headed towards Fairview Road, and then finally they get there. And if you look at the photos, I mean, Sue, you might have a photo of the home. I don't know if I labeled that.
I think you do. Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's kind of this with the rusty, like not rusty, like rust brown shutters.
Mm. How would you describe it? Like, what
Um,
category would you put it in terms of like?
I think it's like kind of like a split level house, or I
Mm,
forget what you call those. But yeah, I mean, it looks, like a standard, probably like, I don't know, 2 or 3 bedroom home.
yeah,
Pretty
very suburban too.
suburban. Yeah. Brick and maybe a little like now I'm just doing like full like extreme home makeover. I'm like, we got stucco, we got brick, we
I
got
was gonna say, I was
rust
like, this
brown
is how you know that
shutters.
Sue is opening her Zillow account tonight.
Yeah, but it looks just like a very like suburban kind of classic
It
suburban
was a
home.
big home on the inside too. It was big, and I believe they also had a pool in the
Oh,
backyard.
wow. Okay.
Possibly, don't quote me. Mm. But if we can get back on the timeline after at least realizing where they're going, where they're headed to, what this party situation might be, because again, it's going to be small. I think in total there were something like 8 people in the home, including the homeowner and his wife and the sister. So they're on the road by 12:15, headed towards this party at the house on Fairview Road. Could be wrong. I could be wrong. I don't think I am, but I could be.
Mm,
I mapped the distance between this bar and Fairview Road, and it's something like less than 5 minutes. Granted, it was snowy outside, but tell me how this would make sense, because I was confused by the timeline, because we get the text at 12:15 where John was like trying to get in touch with the homeowner's sister and be like, where do we go? And then we get another text from her to him at 12:31 where she says hello. And then at 12:40 a.m., she says, pull up behind me, meaning like, oh, you're in the driveway. Like you can pull up like right behind me if you're
mm,
coming in. That's like a half hour after the original text of directions had been sent and they were already on the road. So it just seemed like a lot of unnecessary and strange time had passed
mm,
within that little window for what should have been a 4-minute drive, suddenly got stretched out to a half hour. So my question is the timeline correct? Because this is partially being reconstructed from the sequence of events noted by the sergeant's sister, and she was the one who was texting him. She will also come into play later on.
okay.
According to the sister of the homeowner, John never came inside. This is actually according to almost everybody who was in that party inside the house. John never came in. As mentioned, this is the part of the timeline that we are going to have to reconstruct based on both sides because something went wrong in this window. What we do know is that after hours where something maybe had gone down on the property, Karen has gone back home to where she lived with John. And then she awakes just before 5 a.m. She finds that John never came back from the party, so she says. By 5 a.m., Karen had contacted several people, as I mentioned, and she began returning to the location to go and search for John. And then by 5:30 a.m., Karen and another woman in her car, and I believe the third woman who was actually meeting them at this location in front of the house on Fairview, they spot the remains outside of the house. And all three women fell into hysterics, and two of them jumped on top of John, attempting to perform CPR. He was frozen. He was bloodied with blood on his nose, on his mouth. He had lacerations down his arm, two massive black eyes. And I even saw an EMT report that said he had dried vomit on his mouth.
Hmm.
I didn't see that anywhere else, but I thought it was something to note that an EMT saw that, I guess.
Hmm.
So just after 6 a.m. is when one of the first officers arrives at the scene because word is traveling quick within the unit that Officer John O'Keefe has been found unresponsive outside of a home. Mind you, this is allegedly all captured on body camera footage, which I think part of it has been released for an upcoming, or maybe it's out, Netflix documentary. This had never previously been seen. So they are coming into, see these remains. And mind you, this is in a massive snowstorm and it's still dark outside. It's that early in the morning. Massive snowstorm all around them. And somewhere in the mix of that chaos, I believe after they hit the 7:50 a.m. mark, that is when John is officially pronounced dead and Karen is being driven away, allegedly accompanied by one of the other women. And she says something that many people believe to be the most damning and possibly the ammunition that was needed to build the case against her. In a frantic and emergent panic that took place even before the officers arrived at the scene, Karen starts questioning how this could have happened. And she said something along the lines of, could I have hit him? Did I hit him?
Mm.
And also told them about a cracked taillight on her black SUV that she noticed. She saw it herself, suggesting that it was possible she backed her car right into John and maybe didn't even know. I will accompany that statement with another one that was witnessed by a firefighter who was at the scene just after 6 a.m. when the body was still there, who claims that they heard Karen frantically yelling to both of the women, I hit him, I hit him, I hit him.
Mm.
This has also, I'm going to caveat that and say this has also been twisted, and it has been twisted by her defense as well to say she wasn't declaring it. She was asking it in trying to figure out what the hell happened, saying, I hit him, I hit him. Just hold on to these statements and take it all with a grain of salt
Mhm.
because the way this is unfolding right now, the rug is about to get pulled out by me.
I'm
Prepare.
bracing for impact.
So, of course, these statements are looming, and there is the unanswered question that morning of what happened to this man. Suspicion immediately falls onto Karen as potentially hitting him with her own car the night before, and investigators suspect her of being involved in a drunk driver-related incident. So Karen is brought in to have her blood drawn, I believe that very morning, if not maybe the next day. It was very soon after, right? And it's tested. Forensic analysis would determine that her blood alcohol level at around the time that she had allegedly dropped off John in front of the house, which we're going to put around 12:45 a.m., would have been somewhere between 0.13 to 0.29, which, by the way, that is an enormous
Yeah.
range. That is the difference between a woman who is 5'6" and 140 to 150 pounds, which was her exact size, having between 3 drinks to upwards of 9 or 10 drinks. I will also say I saw online that somebody had done a count based on the surveillance footage, so I can't confirm whether or not this is true, but they said she had 7 drinks in total.
Okay.
Before I go even a sliver further into all of the evidence that gets turned over for this case, what is your initial reaction to how this is unfolding?
I have so many initial reactions. My first
Mhm.
question, who are the two women that are with her when she finds him?
One is the woman that he was texting the night before, the sister of Sergeant John, or sorry, of Sergeant Brian Albert.
Okay.
And the other is this other woman who I believe was also at the party that night. I think she was listed as an acquaintance, and I assumed it was an acquaintance from the night before.
And the sister is not the woman that owns or lives in this home.
Oh, you know what? Actually, I don't think so. However, there is something like in my brain that's coming back from like strange and suspicious days where I was like, was she living with them? I'm
Okay.
remembering that as like an odd detail, but as far as I know, it's just Sergeant Brian Albert and his wife who live in that home, but it's very possible his sister might have lived there as well.
Okay. Because, like, the only reason I'm asking who those two were is like, I'm trying to think to myself, okay, if Karen did it,
Mhm.
which I'm keeping an open mind. But I'm thinking if she
I'm
did
gonna
it,
force you to in a
I
second.
know, I know. If she did it
Mhm.
and she's kind of staging this whole thing as like, oh my God, someone killed him. I'd want to make sure if I'm Karen that whoever I'm bringing with me like doesn't know anything or like is going to be like probably totally supportive of me or is going to make me look good, I guess, which is why I was just
If Karen
curious.
knows that she did it, you're saying?
Yeah. Yeah. Cuz I'm not going to want to introduce like
Mhm.
anybody into that whole mix with me unless I feel like it's really going to like add to the kind of narrative I guess I'm like
To build
crafting.
to build her case.
Yeah, yeah, which I'm not even sure, like, what my through line is there yet, but I just
Mhm.
know that that was, like, something that I initially picked up on. I was like, "Why bring these 2 women?" Or, like, "What about that is gonna maybe
Yeah,
harm or help?"
that is an interesting angle. I had always assumed that she had just contacted them because the last known place where she had left John, where he didn't come back from, was on Fairview, so she was like, "I
Mhm.
have to get in contact with who he knew on Fairview so we can go back to the location," and maybe her thinking, assuming if she was innocent or she's building a narrative, maybe her thinking was, "I have to start building my story with these people specifically to be
Yeah.
like, 'Well, he was last year with you. He was last year with you.'"
Uh-huh.
If she's gonna paint it as like, he was hit by a snowplow or
Uh-huh.
something, if
Uh-huh.
she's trying to lay the seeds or something, maybe she was starting with them deliberately to be like, "He was under your care. He was in your home. Did you let
Yeah.
him go out when he was blackout or something?"
That's kinda what I was thinking, was like, could she be crafting something here that's gonna help her case? My other thought was, holy crap, if this woman who looks to be pretty small, like, if she's had that much to drink,
Mhm.
it seemed a little odd to me that she was apparently out till, like, 1 in the morning or whatever, and then at 5 is, like, up and at 'em, ready to, like, find him. Do you know what I mean? Like, there's a part of
Yes.
me that was like, okay, if you were, like, super hungover and you'd been drinking a ton that next morning and your guy isn't there next to you, you're probably like, "Oh god, he probably, like, stayed at the party or what he's, like, passed out on the couch at that person's house, like, I'm not
Mhm.
gonna find him." Maybe that's just me, but, like, I
No, it's
think it's
possible. I mean,
really strange.
some people don't sleep like that. Even when they drink, they're just a high-strung mind, and granted,
Yeah.
she did work as a financial analyst, so I can imagine she has,
Yeah.
many
Yeah.
a long night, but
But
I will
something feels like like, charged here.
I will color that a little bit because I think it is charged, because we would uncover some evidence that Karen and John were not doing well that night.
I had a feeling about that too.
Yeah, like, and this is something that the prosecution is going to really use against her, and there is some stuff to combat that because there is footage from them at the bar, and of course, this could all be show because they're in front of, like, some of his work friends, but they're very physical, they're very lovey-dovey, they're kissing, they're holding, they're intimate, but there's quite a bit of evidence, both based on text history from that night as well as call history and a voicemail that's left where she was livid with him.
One
Livid.
last question, and I'll let you
Yeah.
press on. Who remind me the relationship between him and the woman he was texting that night to get to the house?
That has never been clear to me other than friends, I suppose. However,
Okay.
if we're getting into some real conspiracy territory here, there is some evidence to suggest that John was done with the relationship.
Okay.
And the niece and nephew had actually come forward with some statements to say that they had actually heard him say that to her
Yeah.
recently, that he's done with the relationship. So there are some conspiracies online that were always brewing that he might have been interested in this woman, Jen, the sister of Sergeant
Mhm.
Brian Albert. And maybe they were carrying on something, whether it was out in the open or it was covert. But there was a reason that Karen dropped him off at the party and didn't go
Mhm.
with him.
Like, "Carry on."
Again,
Like, I'm trying so hard not to start. 'Cause once I start, I can't stop.
okay, stop,
I
baby.
can't stop.
So let's just recap what we got here. Where are we at so far? Dead boyfriend found in the snow, evidence that she was hysterical. His girlfriend, she's hysterical. She's confused about her drinking, her driving. She has this broken tail light. Story seems to kind of be almost writing itself. That's what I wrote down. I was like, the story feels almost too perfect to incriminate Karen because maybe it is. Maybe that's just point blank what happened. By the following day, Karen's SUV was seized under suspicion because at this point, she has just been she's being looked at, right? They brought her in to do a preliminary interview to test her blood alcohol level, and they're like, okay, this woman was drinking that night. Let's get the car, let's process it. This was on February 1st, 2022, I believe, just 3 days after this tragic event. After the car was seized, Karen is also officially arrested, and she is charged with manslaughter, motor vehicle homicide, and leaving the scene of a deadly crash. And the reason they were able to do this is because their first initial suspicion, they're like, was she drunk and she hit reverse and hit him and didn't even know? After they processed the car, which we're also going to take with a grain of salt, they ended up testing the backup camera with a dummy of like a 6-foot man because John was 6'1", and they did a reversal of the car. The rear view camera, perfectly intact, and it even has a beeping feature that if you're getting too close to making contact with something or someone, it will alert you.
Mm.
So they used that as justification to say if she did reverse into him, there is absolutely no way she did not know what she was doing, and she definitely knew and left the scene of the crime. Which I was shocked when I read that. I was like, I would never even think to do that, but I guess that's why I don't work in forensics.
Yeah.
So let's just paint the picture, I guess, of these charges, what they mean, and how the prosecution has told their side of the story of what they believe happened on that night. The prosecution. Lauren,
Juicy mouth, baby. It's
the prosecution, John.
contagious.
So the prosecution believes that there is sufficient evidence that Karen and John had been in a very bad place, as I mentioned, on the very night, and that they were going into this filled with contention and anger, and most of this came from supporting statements, as I said, from the niece and nephew who lived with them. They were interviewed, I believe, on February 22nd, but their testimony is pretty compelling. According to O'Keefe's niece and nephew, who had been living with them for several years at this point, the two had been fighting very, very aggressively in recent months, and their relationship had been toxic from the jump, is what they said.
Mm.
Because they were minors, I couldn't exactly determine just how old they were, but I think for a child to say that a relationship is toxic, they might be closer to teenhood, I'm guessing.
Mhm.
Uncertain. But they had lived with John for about 8 years. The evidence to suggest that there is evidence, I should say, to suggest that they had been arguing that very night, and this was shortly before Karen dropped off John in front of the house. There is allegedly a voicemail that she left on his phone, which was recovered, where she screamed after she dropped him off, "I hate you." So it seems clear enough that there are a few details here that are consistent, at least on both sides, where we can say Karen was definitely drunk. They probably had been fighting or were at odds by the time John got dropped off, and they fought to the very moment he got out of that car on Fairview Road after midnight. The question is, what happened immediately after? Did she floor her car in reverse and kill her boyfriend? Or did something else happen where John walked into that house and something went down there? The prosecution suggests that in a fit of anger, Karen floored her car in reverse after John got out. And this part is debatable, but either knowingly, in her state of rage, she rammed that car into him and then took off and started to plot for the rest of the night. Or if it was unknowingly, she just went to bed drunk, woke up, wasn't there, and then she pieced together what she had done the next morning when she was like, I hit him, I hit him, I hit him. An autopsy of John O'Keefe was conducted and finished, I believe, on January 31st, just about a day after he had been found dead, which concluded that he had suffered severe blunt injuries, specifically to his head, which had likely rendered him unconscious. Details of this examination discussed abrasions all down the right arm. There were multiple lacerations on the face. I mentioned that the EMT saw him with blood on his nose and his mouth, as well as possibly vomit, dried vomit. The 2 black eyes, multiple skull fractures, which led into brain bleeding and evidence of hypothermia. I believe they said something, it was either his kidney or his pancreas had turned dark, which they said was indicative of hypothermia.
Mm.
They believe the death was the combination of the brain bleed and the cold, though. And Karen has also allegedly said over the phone, allegedly over the phone, she said this even before they found the body, sometime around 5 a.m. when she was initially calling those 2 women to like go and look for John. That's when she started to protest. She was like, what if he's dead? What if he got hit by a plow? Which at face value, it is the doth protest too much syndrome, where it's
Yeah.
like my ears perked up in that moment. So investigators were able to source some of the missing plastic pieces because, as I mentioned earlier, Karen's right-hand taillight on the passenger side of the car was broken out. And they are able to find the missing piece to that at the scene of the crime, which they recover. They also made mention in a report that there was a human hair that was found on her taillight once they had processed the SUV on the broken piece of it. We'll get back to that in a second. But from where we stand, this looks like a really cut and dry story. As simple as we can make it, Karen and John were fighting. She was drunk. She was driving. He gets out of the car to head into a party. She floors it in reverse in a fit of anger, rams into him, takes off home, and then the stage is set. This accompanied some additional witness statements from that night. That one of the guests at the house party who was leaving and getting a ride between 1:30 a.m. to 2 a.m. remembered walking out and said they saw something on the ground
Mm.
near the house that was dark and very large near the flagpole, but this guest wasn't exactly sure what they were looking at, so they didn't pay too much attention to it, and they just kept walking, having no idea that possibly what they saw, if their statement is believed to be true, was the body of John O'Keefe. All signs suddenly point to Karen being guilty. However, this is about to go off the rails. Let's examine the other side of the story. But before I do, now that you've heard the prosecution's version of events, how do you feel?
Well, I was just about to say, and then you cleared it up, but I was going to say, dumb
The way you
question.
teed that up, I thought you were going to be, well, just as I thought.
Just as I thought.
Shite.
I was thinking to myself, dumb question, but was the thought that she hit him and then there's still people in this house at the party, which it sounds like yes.
Yes.
So
I believe at the exact time they think that the hit happened, there were allegedly 8 people in the house, and then it said 3 people outside. So it would have been 11 total, again, including the homeowner and his wife. But again, they're all close to each other, either family in that house or they work directly with each other within the police force.
Mm-hmm. Because that was the only thing I kept thinking about is that, like, all right, if I'm sitting, I was looking at the house too, trying to download, but I was thinking to myself, if I'm sitting there in the party and you would hear, well, first of all, you'd probably see the headlights from the car. So you'd know somebody's coming, like inside,
Mhm.
but you would probably hear somebody freaking floor it and then hit a body. But then I was like, well, there's snow there. Like, could the body have just kind of hit the deck and then
That's a good
nobody
point.
heard? But in my head, I was thinking, surely if she, hit the crap out of the guy and then, like, did the party just carry on for hours? And then I was like, well, people were probably wasted. Like, it's all
Mhm.
possible. And now I'm like, now I understand why this case is like this because
You're like, how does it make sense? Oh, it's
make it
crazy
make
because
sense.
what
Yeah.
you're latching onto is like a sliver of what makes this strange. What I'm gonna lay out for you right now in the creepers is gonna make
You're
your
going to lay
hair.
me out.
I'm gonna have to because like the evidence on this, like I can't think of a case that has had more. Is flaky the right word? But there's just nothing feels concrete with this solely because of what you're saying too. It's like, well, the circumstance alone from what the prosecution is laying out of her ramming the car into him. Yeah. Wouldn't they have heard that? Wouldn't somebody
Mhm.
have seen him? Wouldn't she know? Like, it just feels like there would have been more
Or wouldn't someone
to
have
spell that out clearly.
Yeah, or wouldn't someone have gone out to find him because he had just been texting people at that party, right? Saying, "I'm
Mhm.
coming over." Or she had
Not
said
even just that. According
yeah.
to Jen, she had seen the SUV pull up, which is why she sent a text and she was like, pull up behind me, assuming like Karen and John are like coming in.
Oh, right.
But then they never came in. So, according to Jen's story, she was like, "Oh, I just thought that maybe they were at odds and like just backed out of the party at the last minute and didn't want to come in, so they just
Mhm,
drove off." Like
mhm.
it just seemed like it was very low stakes until suddenly it wasn't.
Yeah.
Do you want to examine the other side of this?
What if I just said, "No, baby, I got a hair appointment."
And I would say, well, you know what? Somebody must work for the prosecution who I'm on mic with today, unfortunately.
No, I really am intrigued to hear how this is gonna flip.
It's one of those cases where the deeper you dig
Oh,
between the night, the autopsy, the evidence, the people involved, the story just starts to look more and more suspicious, and for good reason.
oh my god.
So, first of all, I guess let's just remember that timeline of the witness statements, right? From the people who were actually in the home at the party. The sister of the homeowner, Jen, she says she saw the SUV outside. Her timeline was a little murky on this, but I clocked it somewhere between maybe 12:35 to 12:45, like pulling up into the driveway area. They claim that's when they say, oh, they claim that's what they say, but John, again, never came out of the car, never came into the house. So says Jen. That's when Karen remembers that she might have something to disprove this little timeline that Jen is giving. So remember how I said that the drive to the home on Fairview from the bar, I think the Waterfall Grill, it was something like 4 minutes, but
Mhm.
somehow we're like 30 minutes into them being in front of the house.
Mhm.
There's actually something to disrupt this and dispel it and say that Karen really did get there much earlier and did drop off John. And I find this timestamp almost impossible to refute. Pay attention to these specific stamps. So
Mhm.
they're leaving. Karen and John leave at exactly 12:11 to maybe 12:15. That's when they're on the road in the SUV coming from the bar, headed to the party on Fairview Road, right? 4-minute drive, apparently. It was 12:14 when initially John got the text from the sister of the homeowner that said, "Come here." So Jen then calls John to give him instructions over the phone at 12:14, and this is a call that she would mysteriously delete off her phone when her phone was probed, taken in and probed. That call was recovered. According to John's phone records, there was a second call where he called her at 12:18, another call that was also mysteriously deleted off Jen's phone.
Mm.
We then have a record of John's phone that he typed in an address to Fairview Road at exactly 12:19. So that's how we can shorten a bit of that like 30-minute timeline to be like, okay, so they didn't actually know where they were going till 12:19 where he got the instructions. That's when him and Karen are driving. We know that she made a 3-point turn on Cedar Crest, which I didn't even know you could determine that information from like phone data, but they can. And we can actually tell like where they were going. By 12:24 a.m., we have confirmation from the data on John's phone that he and Karen are in front of the home on Fairview Road, 12:24 a.m. Now, this sequence of the timeline is the most confusing for everybody who has looked at this data. Here's what we know. Karen's phone connects to the Wi-Fi at John's house exactly 7 minutes from this location. Or 7 minutes, I believe, from the last known timestamp of the location where we think she was there from this location. So she connects to his home Wi-Fi at 12:36, which would mean, just based on proximity, she would have had to have left at the latest by 12:29 a.m. That means when they pulled up at 12:24 to 12:29, very tight 5-minute window of arguing in front of the house, maybe, but then she does not linger. She takes off. 12:29 the latest. At 12:31 a.m., we also have data that from her phone, Karen's phone, that suggested that for a split second, she reversed at 24 miles per hour, roughly 60 feet. And what also happens at that time, 12:31, is that John's phone suggested that he was moving. He travels 24 meters, which is roughly 70 to 80 feet. 70 to 80 feet. Which initially my mind was like, okay, if it happened at the same time that she reversed and he starts moving at the same time, is that not indicative of her reversing and him going flying? But then I clocked the distance and I was like, wait, 70 to 80 feet. There is no way you can hit a human being with a car going
You'd be
24 miles per hour
flying.
and
Yeah.
go 80 feet, which, mind you, John's body was only found 12 feet from the road,
Yeah.
like on the lawn. But I was like, well, what could 70 to 80 feet be? I was like, how? Because his phone was definitely moving that distance.
Throw his
So
phone.
no, because his phone was found under him. His
Oh.
phone was found under his body, which also doesn't make sense. I started to do some digging and I was like, wait a second, how much distance is there roughly for most suburban, like residential homes from the street level to get to somebody's front door? To go from the street up somebody's driveway and then take a left to get to a front door is about 80 feet.
Mm.
It is suggestive that John did make it to the door, which is what Karen said she saw. She said that she saw John, after he got out of the car, walk to the front door.
However, wait, can I just ask one
Please?
thing?
Please.
Any shot that she could have walked up to the door
Sure.
and then spooked and left. Not that I think she's clocking. Let me make it look like John walked to the door and walked out. Because, like, I didn't even know that you could track feet with somebody's phone. Is that what we're tracking?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's mostly, this data is all from Karen's phone data as well as John's phone data.
Okay. I almost wondered. Sorry, I don't want to get you off track. But I
No,
was thinking
please.
to
Oh my God, let's
myself,
discuss.
is there a way that, like, Karen, like, hits him and then is in a kind of drunken stupor gonna, like, go in and confront somebody in that house, and then it's like, wait, what the hell am I doing? Like, I gotta get out of here. I just hit my boyfriend.
So Karen hits him and then takes his phone and
Like,
then
has his
walks.
phone, I guess, or something, and is gonna confront. Because I'm starting to build and stop me, because I'll go off the
No,
tracks.
please.
I'm starting to build this narrative that the girl he was texting inside the house was someone that Karen was jealous of, or there was someone in that party that, like, that whole night they had been kinda hanging out because he wanted to hang out with somebody else that was there and not Karen, is kind of what I'm feeling, gut instinct, but I don't know if any of that's plausible.
I
But
think it's good to exercise talking about the prosecution side of this to say, like, how does any of this make sense? Because it does look strange on paper. What I will say is that we don't know if the reversal of the car actually took place on Fairview Road at 12:31 because, as I said, the latest that she could leave in the snow to get back to John's house to connect to that Wi-Fi at 12:36 was 12:29.
Mhm.
So this is possibly suggestive that she went down a road already in the direction towards her and John's home and then had to reverse because she went up like a dead end street or something. But again, her memory on this is fuzzy because she was very drunk,
Mhm. Mhm.
which does not help her case whatsoever because it's like, well, if you can't remember what happened, we have to like fill in the blank. But I still think that John's phone moving 80 feet from after a timestamp that Karen had allegedly left the scene
Mhm.
at 12:29 and he's on foot moving at 12:31, I think builds a stronger case that John was alone.
Mhm. God.
Just because if it was your scenario where it was Karen, where she had already hit him, had reversed the car, and then took his phone for whatever reason,
Yeah.
why she would take his phone, and then she's going to approach the door, that would probably put her even closer to like 12:32. And then she has so much distance to travel, 7 minutes worth of distance, but somehow she is definitively connected to the home Wi-Fi at 12:36.
Okay.
So she's gone. She's off the road, gone. I mean, that's a really
God.
crunchy timeline, but that's pretty damn compelling for an
Yeah.
investigator.
Yeah.
So the reason that I had mentioned, all of like the importance around like the 70 feet and like the oddity of that is that I think that Karen had maybe put up a fuss well before they'd even gotten into the house. That's what I think might have happened in this car. And she made mention that she did not want to go in, mostly because she said she was having like stomach trouble from the bar. That could have been a cover. But she was also protesting with John well before this, saying, like, we don't know these people. Like, that was part of the reason that she like didn't want to go to this after party. She was like, you're like barely acquainted with this homeowner. I don't think they even extended an invite personally to us, so I don't want to go. John, for whatever reason, to your point, really did want to go. So
Mhm.
that's why they parted ways, according to Karen's side of the story. Karen felt uncomfortable. She felt that she hadn't received the invite. John hadn't received the invite, and they would not be welcomed in that home. And we would also find out a little bit later that there was somebody in that home, whether Karen or John knew this, that John had some bad blood with.
Mm.
Mm. So this is when a shocking blow to the case comes, or I shouldn't say a blow, but a turn, where this is why I think this case will be cemented in history, because Karen comes in after all of this collection of discussion, timeline, evidence, this data, and in a turn of events, she pleads not guilty. And her defense team leads with a very inflammatory statement that got a lot of people upset, but also won a lot of people to her side. That this is a mass operation cover up by people inside at the Boston PD to frame Karen for something that went down in that house.
Oh my
And
God.
the evidence that the defense brings to the table is absolutely shocking. So let me lay it all out for you.
Okay.
First off, we got the confirmation. Like I said, we know that Karen goes back to the house and her phone connects to the Wi-Fi at 12:36. This is known, irrefutable. At 12:31, we have that John traveled 70 to 80 feet, possibly on foot, is what we believe, and that could have been him traveling to the door of the home. The autopsy, while it was conclusive that there was severe damage to the head, also showed these unexplained abrasions all down the arm. Do you have the picture of that?
Yeah, I was looking at that earlier, just being like, what the heck could that have been?
It's interesting because the prosecution suggested they were like, this is road rash, although it appears nowhere else on the body. And there have been independent examiners who have looked at this and said this looks absolutely nothing like road rash if you've
Mm-mm.
ever seen a body that's been thrown across a road. Private examiners across the country began to speculate that these marks were actually from a dog attack, including bites and scratch marks from a dog, something that was immediately connected to the owner of the home, Sergeant Brian Albert, who owned a very large German Shepherd that had a sealed off record of attacks. It had bitten people before. And people started to question if these bites could have come from the dog, and if so, did that mean that at some point John had been inside that house? Much more mysterious than that, Sergeant Brian Albert allegedly got rid of this dog very soon after John O'Keefe's body was found.
Hmm.
That is not a normal thing. I'm going to put this out there just of my own personal opinion because this is not a black and white fact, but a dog that you have owned for years that is considered a family dog, and then you're saying that this person who died on your lawn never even came into your home, but they have what looks like marks on them, dog bites, scratches, to then get rid of the dog and rehome the dog in a different state after this case hits the media. It's odd. Very
Super
odd.
odd. Did they know definitively, or they never were able to definitively say it was a dog?
They could not definitively say. And there is
Okay.
also quite a bit of conspiracy around. I mean, when we're talking about like the connection and cover up of who could have been connected to this case, we're talking Boston PD, we're talking the examiners, we're talking some people who worked on the investigative team, and believe it or not, the judge. There are text records to show they are connected to the judge, which the defense actually said she should recuse herself because she is connected to these people, and she refused to do so. So, what's interesting too about this, that I also wanted to mention while the defense is laying out all of the evidence to support that John did go into the home, is that they brought up this ring camera at John's house. John had a ring camera that was situated in the driveway, I believe right above the garage. And for some reason, after the suspicion around Karen came forward, that was confiscated by investigators. And this is why we say the investigative team might have been corrupt. That ring camera was in perfect working order. And they only turned over one relevant video, which showed at 5 a.m. Karen frantically leaving the house, after she had called people and she's like, I don't know where John is. Oh my God, what if he's dead? Like, what if a plow hit him? She's backing out of the garage and then she pivots the car to get out of the driveway. And you can see in that moment that her right tail light is broken,
Mm.
which the prosecution is like, look, this is definitive evidence that like her tail light was broken before John's body was even discovered. So she must have been the one to do it. But also, if that ring camera was perfectly intact, would it not also show footage of her arriving at the garage late that night after she came home and connected to the Wi-Fi at 12:36? And then they could check to see, is her tail light broken then? Because that would have been the smoking gun where it's like, this is a done deal. If she came home from dropping him off and her tail light was broken, she
Well,
definitively hit him.
is it
That
not
footage doesn't exist.
is it not already obvious though because the taillight was found at that house?
Well, that's the other part of the cover up. It wasn't immediately found. In fact, nobody saw it.
Ah.
Nobody saw that chunk of the tail light at the scene until hours after the scene was processed and the body was removed. Only once investigators allegedly came back did they say they found it on top of a snowbank, which people also thought was strange because There had been 6 inches of snow that had accumulated. So they were like, why was this not buried under snow? It just seemed to be perfectly placed on top of a snowbank in the yard. But nobody had spotted this red chunk of a taillight before. Nobody.
Oh my, I feel like I'm in the old Tower of Terror ride at the beginning before they drop you where it's like
Well, look at who you're looking at, honey. I mean,
I'm like,
am I not an old school elevator operator? Come on. Like,
I know.
come on.
This is absolutely nuts.
I'll take it a step further. Remember that hair that the investigative team said they collected from the taillight once they had processed the SUV? And they were like, there's a hair. It's a human hair. It's got to be John's. Once examined further, was not a human hair, actually.
I knew you were going to say that.
Yeah.
Was it a dog?
No,
Oh.
this is the thing. They never disclosed what it was. They just said that it was not human. That's what the defense led with. And some people have speculated they're like, maybe the sample was just too small for them to tell whether it was human or animal, but was not a human hair and was not connected to John O'Keefe. So some people started to question. They were like, listen, if we're getting into the territory of like planting evidence and this mysterious like broken chunk of a plastic taillight is found at the scene hours after everybody had been there and nobody had seen it or noticed it, and we have this instance where there's a mysterious hair found on the broken portion only after the SUV is collected and processed. And the prosecution is turning over what the investigator said was the complete collection of video from the Ring camera at John's house. But for some reason, there is no video at 12:36 of when Karen came home. What's going on? You know, like that to me, that's one of the most mysterious things about it. If the Ring camera was working perfectly fine, so much so that they could get the footage of her at 5 a.m. showing the broken taillight, which helps support the case of the prosecution and what they're saying, why is there no video to show? Because help me God, if something could have happened in the middle of the night where somebody came to that house, because they know where John O'Keefe lives, it's an officer, and somebody messed with that taillight after the fact, there's no footage of it. And I have even more to support this. It seems like I'm skewed one way, and I suppose I am.
No, I don't
but like,
I don't think you are.
I just have to call out the inconsistencies because I think that it's like bull when I'm seeing so much of this stacked up. So all of these allegations, if I can just like sum this all up of what this is building towards, it is suggestive, of course, of the cover-up and specifically pointing to Sergeant Brian Albert. Do you have a picture of him as well?
I think so.
should
The
have had
bald
one.
guy with the yellow tie.
Yellow tie. Does he have a beard?
Yes.
The little, like, yeah, that's him.
Yeah.
I should have included a picture actually of his nephew because he's also relevant to this case, believe it or not.
Okay.
I know this is a long
He
one.
looks
but
very angry in this photo.
stay with me,
Yeah.
as a sergeant would.
Oh, I'm with you,
So,
baby. I'm
the story-
kind of like upset when all the evidence stops populating because this is really just juicy.
There's even more to be honest. Like, it doesn't stop here, but this is, let me just like paint, I guess, like what the defense is working towards, because we're like, yeah, cover up, but why did this even happen? Why was John killed? The defense is arguing that something happened in that home that caused a fight to break out where John was beaten severely, where he received the 2 black eyes as well as the damage to the skull, in addition to the dog attacking him either before or after the beating. Some people have said he was being beat and then the dog knew to attack that person, or the dog attacked and then John fought back, trying to injure the dog, which again, nobody has ever examined the dog. The dog disappeared, basically. And then when he fought back trying to beat the dog that had bit him, that was when the room attacked. So once John was unconscious, those at the party who witnessed this or participated in the beating assisted in bringing the body outside of the home and just placing him in the snow. The theory by the defense was then coupled with a bombshell reveal from some phone data that was collected. So I'm going to need you to hold onto your ass cheeks, baby.
Strapped.
In a search result that was deleted and then recovered from the phone of Jen McCabe, the sister of Sergeant Brian Albert, she searched how long to die in the cold at 2:27 a.m. that night. Something she previously admitted to searching, but said that it was after they had found John's body. And she said, oh, when we found him, I was trying to, think how long he could have like been out there in the snow and figure out like how long does it take to die in the cold, which from what I read, allegedly she did search at 6 a.m. as well. Twice this was searched. It was only the one at 2:27 that had been deleted. The exact same phrase searched twice. One after the body was found, one hours before anybody allegedly knew John was even dead. Before I press on, how does that sit?
I mean, that's the most damning thing in my opinion thus far. I mean, I just ah that's really hard to explain away. And I
Could say
don't
it
I'm
was
sure
morbid
there
curiosity and just happened to be
yeah.
coincidence, I guess,
Yeah.
is
That's
maybe what they'll lead
really hard
with.
to explain away because I just because hold on, remind me what you said her reasoning was. She just said I was curious because of like
She
the
said
weather?
she had originally said that she had searched it after 6 a.m., which would have been after all three women discovered the body of John O'Keefe.
Right,
And she
right,
said
right.
while they were trying to resuscitate him and we had called 911, I was searching how long can somebody be in the cold before they
Right.
die to see if we can help him, if we can save him.
But
This
what
was
was her
not.
reasoning for 227?
Well, this is the thing. They haven't given one, to be honest. And they've also tried to cast doubt on this, and they're like, no, the data was extrapolated in a different way that like skewed the timestamp of when that was
Mhm.
searched. That's not what it seems like.
That was the only thing I was thinking was I was like, did the defense say like well, because here is the weirdest thing. It's like there are glitches that happen. There are things that
Sure.
happen that make things weird. So in my head, I was like, that just seems that would be like the only explanation is like there was a glitch, but
Quite a damning glitch, my God.
yeah,
Like the
but
chances of that
the
being
chances of
that's like a
that are
framing glitch.
nuts. I also was thinking to myself as you were describing it, like this whole kind of gang up mentality and like beating him. In my mind, I was more so thinking, I kind of feel like this was a situation where most of the people had left and then it was just him and the sergeant and maybe would Jen have been there as well?
Believe so. Yeah.
Because
I
sorry,
think
what
she
was their
stayed.
relationship again?
Jen and who?
The sergeant.
Brother, sister.
Brother sister, right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I actually think she stayed at the house that night, which is why I was confused and I was like, does she live there or not? Because it
Because
is a big house.
that connection also makes me feel like she's got her brother's back to cover
Like
this up.
she's in on whatever's happening.
Yeah.
And there's
And
more family that's at that house too.
yeah. Oh,
I could take this a step further, to be
okay.
honest,
Oh, baby,
because we
you are
also
on my neck right now. I'm
it just
like,
keeps
just
piling.
yeah.
I know it's a longer case, but like
Yeah, no, it's really
I
just
can't there's
yeah, yeah,
just
yeah,
so
yeah.
much here. And that's
Yeah.
because it's a modern case because like they really were like throwing everything at the wall when it came to this trial. They're like, we found this, but I found a witness statement that I also thought was compelling. Some people don't include this. I'm choosing to. There was a plow driver who actually went by, and he took the stand for this too. He testified with this. He went by that house on Fairview. He was plowing Fairview at exactly 2:30 in the morning, and he distinctly said there was not that much snowfall on the ground at that point. I did not see John O'Keefe's body
Mm,
outside of that house, and that was 2:30 a.m. He went on the record to say this. This only furthered the possibility that this could have been a cover up, and maybe at 2:30 a.m. John O'Keefe's body was still in the home while they were figuring out what to do.
mhm,
Additionally, the defense called for an outside examination of the remains, where it was suggested by this examiner that they brought in for this that none of this looks consistent with the impact from a car, someone who was hit by a car. Their opinion is that these injuries looked a lot closer to a beating, with maybe some type of a hard glass over the head or a hard object to the head, and suggested that the car reversal impact based on his height would not have impacted his head. It would have impacted his torso, where he had almost no damage. It just didn't make any sense. And they also called attention to an odd detail in surveying the scene that one of his shoes, John's shoes, was discovered at the scene off his foot and was 50 feet away from him, I believe closer to the end of the driveway. Something that in my mind, if I'm going with the defense side of this, where they carried John's body out to the street level late into the night, is it possible one of his shoes fell off his foot
mhm.
while they were carrying him and nobody noticed it until the morning? They also called evidence surrounding the broken tail light. Only hours, like I said, after the scene was processed, then was the broken plastic piece of the tail light found, and that stuck out to me as well. I visible top snowbank. Yes, this is visible on top of the snowbank, which I thought was strange. So all of this to say, let's just say that we have a cohesive timeline in front of us that the defense is going to put out of how they think this went down. So strap in for this one because I think this is going to take a turn that you're not expecting.
Okay.
John O'Keefe gets to the house. Karen drops him off. She's angry. She leaves a voicemail. They've been fighting, but she does see him walk to the front door. He gets inside, and while he was there, he either got attacked by that dog, punched in the face by Brian Albert's nephew, or both. The reason the nephew comes into play here, this is 18-year-old Colin Albert, is that he and John O'Keefe had beef, actually,
Mm.
because Colin had previously been littering on John O'Keefe's lawn, and they had had a confrontation, allegedly, much earlier to this. So the possibility was that John O'Keefe was going into a party of acquaintances and didn't actually have an invite, maybe wasn't welcome there, other than the sister who invited him, and didn't know what he was getting into or who was going to be there. So he walks in, sees this nephew, who, from what I read, is a bit of a hothead, and there's an immediate confrontation that takes place.
Mm.
A verbal argument that somehow turns physical, and maybe in an act of defense, John tried to push or punch the nephew back after he attacked him, and that prompted the family to go in and start beating John. Maybe it just went too far.
Mm.
I want to call attention to that, and the reason that I think it's relevant to mention is because not long after John O'Keefe's death, there was a very infamous photo that surfaced of Colin Albert, the nephew, where he appears to be out at a bar with friends, and his hands are covered in bloody scrapes that are healing.
Shoot.
So, is that our story? Is my question for you. I mean, we've got a whole list of compelling evidence to suggest that something doesn't totally line up or make sense with this narrative around Karen, and we have potential motive from somebody in the house who might have wanted to get into it with John O'Keefe. Does any of that feel like it's holding weight for you so far?
I mean, I think it was kind of obvious at the beginning. I was definitely feeling a little bit more of the Karen side of everything. I think but I now I definitely feel I'm swayed more in your direction. What I,
I mean,
f-
I did my
I,
best job I could.
well, no, I mean, but that 227 search for how long can a body survive outside? I mean, that is
Can I add to that a
tough.
little bit, by the way? Because I have a couple of other timestamps here you might
Yeah,
be interested in.
yeah.
So here's something else that we know. There was another person at that party who was a colleague of Sergeant Brian Alberts, who left the party just after 1:30 a.m., sometime between 1:30 to 2. And what we know he did is he went to the police station to do admin work. We know this person went there. And I thought that was odd
Mhm.
for a Saturday night after drinking after a party that he immediately takes off and goes to a police station to do admin work when almost nobody else is going to be there. And at first I tossed it out and I was like, well, you know what? Maybe that's just the nature of their hours and their line of work. Maybe they do have to go and patch up things very late into the night, even after you've been drinking, even after you're coming from a party on Saturday night. The thing that cemented it as strange to me was that, and this is new, this is very new. I believe it only came out as of 2024. There were several calls, data from phone records that were displayed in the courtroom that showed Sergeant Brian Albert had called this person. I believe his name was Brian Higgins. He had called him several times starting at 12:22 a.m., which would have been the exact time that this person was in the police station doing the admin work.
Mm,
5 minutes after that is when Brian Albert's sister makes that search. How long to die in the cold?
mm.
What was going on between that window of maybe 1:30 a.m. to maybe, let's say, 3,
Yeah.
where there's a series of calls, somebody's at a police station, and somebody at the house is searching how long to die in the cold? That's my question.
It's also just starting to feel like that Karen, if she didn't do it, unfortunately really shot herself in the foot by reacting the way she did and, like, showing up and making it, like, a huge scene because these guys know how to build a case against somebody.
Mhm.
They have to do it a lot, and
Which I don't think she knew in
uh,
the fit of, like, hysteria.
of
Because
course
this is a
not.
traumatic thing, but I think that's what was happening is,
Of
like, she
course not.
didn't know anything she was saying as a presumed innocent person, or maybe she even was so drunk she thought she was guilty. She's just saying things and has no idea it's gonna be weaponized against her.
Yeah, and in my mind, though, I'm thinking that they're going, "Oh god, well, this is perfect." Like, and it seemed like there was already some ammunition there that they knew that here's something I think kinda like baseline that we can't toss away about this. He really wanted to go to that party, and like,
Mhm.
against her will, she didn't wanna go. There was somebody at that party that he wanted to see, and
That's a good point. A really good point,
I don't
actually.
know who that was, but
I
they
think you do.
knew. I mean, I do. I think I do. But they
I
knew
don't know who that
more.
was. I mean, I do.
I know. But they know more than they're letting on, and I think that when they saw that person, if it's who I'm thinking of, would have known that there was some tension between him and Karen building already,
Mhm.
that when she reacted that way, it was like, "Oh my god, this is the golden opportunity to make this look like crazy jealous girlfriend killed her boyfriend," or,
Mhm.
like, it's gonna make us look really good, and they damn it, I am so curious to know how they weaseled their way out of the 227 search history thing, because that is just it's a glitch.
It's a glitch,
It's a
baby. Well, I
glitch.
think bringing up the Jen versus Karen thing, what we do know is that if this was a frame job, if this was some kind of conspiracy that was gonna be a cover up between multiple people who worked in the force, because cops do know how to keep a secret. I think when it comes to this, I
Yeah.
think often when we see like this reminded me somewhat of like the Tamla Horsford case where it's like somebody goes into a party situation and then are we to believe that everybody in that home was able to keep their mouth shut? When it comes to a room full of cops and family of the cop, I believe that there could be a very strategic plan and conversation about what to say and what not to say, and how
Mhm.
everybody remained quiet
Yeah.
indefinitely. But I agree with you. There was some reason that he felt implored to go to that party, even though it was like close to 1 in the morning, even though he didn't know the homeowner very well. And I have to assume it was Jen, the sister.
Mhm.
So I almost wondered if that could have played into the confrontation that took place in the home. He's not welcome. Colin Albert, the nephew, is already there and they have beef. And he's coming in to basically talk to, be with, poach the sister.
Yeah.
And maybe that's something that the brother, Sergeant Brian Albert, didn't like. And maybe that
Mhm.
escalated things. Something escalates into possibly a beating and a dog attack,
Yeah.
right? The dog attack is also the strange bit that we keep like skating over. But what we do know is that after that happened, the conspiracy to frame Karen had already started because in the middle of the night, if this was done, somebody went to her house and somebody planted everything they needed to on that back tail light to set the stage because by the time she leaves at 5, it's already broken. And we mysteriously have that footage missing of her returning back to the home. There's no footage from that block of time.
I also, when you first, mentioned the taillight thing, I
Mhm.
was just thinking to myself, like, if you hit somebody, like, wouldn't there be other damage other than just the taillight?
That's what the examiner said too. She was like, "Not only does this not like his injuries look like what I've seen in car accidents." She's like, "I don't think I've seen damage like this from the impact of a person. Like typically you wouldn't if your head was hit, you wouldn't bust out a tail light."
Yeah, 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 yeah. Like, you'd have to literally be, like, in the perfect position to bust your head through the
Yeah.
taillight,
And
like,
this was somebody, mind you, who's looked at I think I read 12,000 different cases. Like
oh
they're
my
not
god.
exactly light on the experience. They were just
Yeah.
like, "Yeah, this one doesn't look normal to me." But if I could tail end all of this to where it goes, most of the trial would take place in 2024. And I believe they called over 60 witnesses. I think upwards of close to 70 different witnesses who all testified, all took the stand, and a jury deliberated for more than 25 hours. And they could not come to a unanimous decision. This case was ruled a mistrial.
Mm.
So the retrial, I did not know this, is happening this month. It starts January 27th, 2025, where Karen remains in flux as to whether a jury will find her guilty of vehicular manslaughter or this is a frame job and she's innocent. But all that said, what I have presented to you today and to the creepers is what I know.
Oh my God. I'm going to need the creepers. Please weigh in. I need to know what y'all think about this. This is,
Madness. Crazy case.
and I got to
Crazy
follow
case.
this now. I,
I know we should do a re-up once the trial gets going to see
yeah,
like what
we
are the
definitely
updates.
should.
There's a big following around Karen. There are so many people that support Karen.
That's a poor Karen. Yeah, you know what? I'm looking now at the photo
Mhm.
of her and John, just trying to, do my thing where I like just try to get a vibe for how they. I just, I wonder if Karen has shared what it was that was causing their tension or like but I'm sure she has been told by her team, keep your mouth shut because whatever you say is going to get used against you. Like, even
Mhm.
if it was, even if she was really forthright and just said, listen, couples have problems. And I felt like he was, I don't know why. I just have such a gut feeling that she was really jealous of somebody or that he was stepping out or something. But
I can shed a bit of light on it from what I know.
okay.
Well, she has claimed that part of the root of the issue with their relationship is that although he did care for his niece and nephew, there were many, many times because she lived with them that he was not available and was not taking care of them. And so much of the responsibility to take care of and watch those kids was put onto her. And I
Mm,
believe her when she says this, and it seemed evident because additionally, from the night that John O'Keefe died, after she got home, after she had made the call and said, I hate you, she tried calling him several times, I think close to like 1 in the morning, and she sent him texts and she was like, "I'm leaving. Your kids are gonna be alone, so you have to come home." Like, there was a reason. She was like, "I don't want you at that party." She was like, "John, I'm leaving." And he never responded, so she ended up following it up, I think, before 2 AM, and she was like, "I'm staying here tonight. The kids are gonna be fine." She was like, "But why don't you contact me?" Like, she was confused that he wasn't responding to any of the bait of being like, "I'm leaving. Your kids are gonna be alone. I'm not watching them anymore."
yeah. But some people read those texts and they think it's all like made up to make it look
Fabrication.
like, yeah.
Mhm.
Good God. I really don't know. This is so weird. When you guys covered it on Strange and Suspicious, what did most people lean towards?
Jamie and I were both like, "What time is it?" We were like, "Fuck the Boston PD." I was like, "This is the cover up." 129. I'm trying to think if there was anybody who was on the side of believing that Karen had done it. Marat, I think, was definitely suspicious of it as well. I wanna say Nanette took the Occam's razor approach, and she goes, "We've looked at a million drunk driver cases. This is a girlfriend who was enraged. She was
Mhm.
drunk. They were having a fight. She flirted into him. She's like, maybe it's just Occam's razor." You know?
Yeah.
I just can't ignore, and granted, maybe I could be skewed from, like, the defense has done a great job at convincing me personally. So I'm like, maybe my image of this is skewed from what they've presented.
I don't think it is though. There's just so many moving parts that like, yeah, because you know me, I'm always like Occam's razor. I feel like I
Mhm.
always tend to lean that
I
way.
know, I
And
was kinda
I'm
surprised that I, like, won you over towards the end. I was like, I think
yeah.
Stu's gonna be on the opposite side of the spectrum and be like, "Karen killed him."
Yeah, because I think a lot of kills happen out of some really deep-seated emotion. Like you
Mhm.
feel it's just a moment of your anger or your sadness or your, whatever jealousy takes over you and you do something stupid. But I think that the nature of what he looked like and those the scratches
Like,
in the
lacerations on the
eyes and the
arm, yeah.
lacerations, that yeah, I mean, that looks like to me like a beat up job. It doesn't look like you got hit by a car.
Well, I was trying to think of, like, if the Karen, situation was true that she was responsible, I was like, if he did receive most of the impact to his head, was he crouching when he got hit? Like, I was trying to figure out what, and
Right.
also, so he gets hit, and then his phone says that he travels 80 feet. He didn't travel 80 feet, so I don't know how that happened, and his shoe ends up 50 feet away from him, all from a car impact? I know
Let
we've
me
seen some strange cases like Jalea Davis with that, but odd.
let me also just say this. If I'm driving to a house full of police officers that are having a party and I hit a body, you better believe that the police officers in that house are like they're on high alert always of like something,
If they heard
something's
it.
off.
If the
Yeah,
music
if
wasn't
they heard it.
raging,
But
if somebody hadn't landed in the snow.
Something about that is fishy to me because
It is, I agree. I'm
I feel
just
like
giving the
cops are
devil's
gonna be the
advocate approach.
yeah, I feel
I'm
like
the
cops are
prosecution
gonna be
tonight,
the
baby.
they're gonna be the first guys to be like, "I heard something outside, like, let's go check on it," you know? Like,
Mhm.
that just seems really weird that they knew he was coming over, he would get hit by a car, and nobody would go check on him for hours on end.
Or that somebody said at 1:30 AM, they left and saw the body in the yard, so they
Mhm.
claim, and yet we have a plow witness who said, "No, I drove by at 2:30 and there was no body in front of that house. I would have seen it."
Yeah. Also but hold on, who walks past something that looks like a body and says,
Granted, it was at the flagpole in the yard, which is a bit of a distance in the dark from the driveway, but they said it
Yeah.
just looked like a large black mass near the flagpole, but I never thought that it was a body.
Hmm.
And they also said they were drinking, so
Yeah.
who knows?
That's the other thing. There's, like, so much alcohol involved in this case that it's like, "Oh god."
Mhm. Also weird to have an 18-year-old nephew at this party with a bunch of, like, 40-year-old cops who
Very
were all, like,
strange.
getting blackout.
Yeah.
Odd detail. I still wanna know more about that dog. You know what I mean? Like, I do think that's odd too that they got rid of the dog. You don't get rid of dogs that you've had for, like, close to a decade
Do they
out of
know
nowhere.
where, who took the dog?
No, that's the big mystery around it. This is what has been allegedly publicly displayed is that they rehomed the dog out of state for an unknown reason.
Mm,
Nobody knows where the dog is if it's out of state. So some people are suspecting the dog was put down
yeah. I was just thinking that.
and then cremated to remove any, I don't know, possible evidence or connection to the canine bite to see if that was going to match or the claw marks in his arm.
Mhm.
Because if
Y
there's a dog attack in the mix of all of this, it shoots the whole story to shit. Sorry, 133. I'm
Also
apologizing to myself
no
because I'm gonna have to edit it.
it's also, uh most people don't wanna take on a very violent, aggressive German Shepherd that's been living with somebody else for 12 years or however many years.
Probably a difficult dog to
That's a
rehome.
diff yeah, like, it's something's weird. The dog knows.
The
Something's
dog does
off.
it. The dog partially did it. That's
Yeah,
true.
if it's true. It does look like dog bites, though, on the arm,
Yeah,
not
they even
like
compared it to what other, what similar dog attacks would look like on an arm, and it's actually insane how close it is.
yeah, it
It's
it looks
insane.
very similar.
When you compare that to, like, what standard road rash looks like from accidents, this looks nothing of the sort.
I don't even know what the hell road rash would look like, but I know it's not this.
And also, why would it be on only one part of his body? And it was because, and again, he's not even found in the road. I'm gonna tell he's found on top of grass and snow on a lawn.
Mhm.
I just can't work out in any part of my mind, like, how any of that makes sense. The road rash, the him traveling 80 feet, and yet the phone is found under him,
Yeah,
the shoe. I'm like, "What the hell happened here?"
yeah.
And it's ballsy, I will say, like, for Karen and her defense team to go up against the Boston PD, that is not an easy fight. You are gonna have every facet of that system, even through the courts, working against you,
Mhm.
and that is what they've deployed too. They have I think some people have been, either arrested or dismissed from the case for intimidating people on the defense.
Wow. Yeah, that's kind of why I was saying at the beginning, like, Boston PD is, like, a strong force. I would if there's Bostonian creepers that listen to us, like, I'm sure y'all probably have heard a lot about this case, but I'd be curious to know if you feel like I'm reading into that too much, just like what I know about Bostonians, that they're very, like, tough people. Like, so I can
Well, I
imagine
just liken
Karen's
the
being
size
tough
of the
with this
force to,
and
like, the NYPD.
yeah, but I feel like Karen's probably pretty tough and has some tough people rallied behind her, and I would
Mhm.
assume, obviously, with the Boston PD that that's gonna be a tough win for her, obviously.
We
Oh
will
god.
see. Come the end of January this year, we will see as this all
Wow.
kicks off again for another year of a trial, which way the jury is gonna lean.
Thank you so much for running me through all of that. That was
I
like
was gonna say, are you ready to join the defense team now?
I literally I'm like, I feel like I just had a whole class in, like, that case, like, that
Yeah.
is really what a mind F.
You don't wanna miss any of the details, they're all super important, and, one last note that I didn't have in my script for this or anything, but I will just say that in all of it, of course, I feel for Karen if this is true, that this is a frame job, but I also feel for those kids, the niece and nephew of John O'Keefe, for them to lose their parents and then lose the next parental figure they had
Mhm.
in this tragic and mysterious way. That I don't know if that helps or hurts the story, because so much of their testimony, whether they were coaxed into it or not, is about vilifying Karen and this relationship being toxic, which all could have been true, but just adds feed to the fire. And I just feel for them in all of this, that they've suffered
Yeah.
so much loss, and I don't even think at this point they're adults.
Yeah. God, baby.
After dark.
I'm like I'm gonna be reeling from this for, like, a couple of hours. I'm gonna
Yeah, I
be
mean, we
like
might get some big blowout updates in the next like month or so, like even before we go on tour. Like we could get some really major stuff that drops from the defense when they reapproach this in the end of Jan.
looks like we're gonna have to go back to Upham's.
Sorry. We sign on for another chamber contract just
That's
to be
right.
in the vicinity
Just to
for a
be in
few
the
weeks.
vicinity.
Oh
That would
God.
be full circle. Oh my god.
Well, Creepers, I want to thank you for going on this ride with
Creepers.
me. I know that was a long, lengthy, and highly detailed case, but wildly interesting. Wicked interesting, if I can give a
Wicked
little nod to
interesting.
Boston.
Well, you actually say wicked in your besides the actual show, which was
I know, I
half
know. I do
half your
say wicked.
vocabulary, but you do say wicked. You got a little New
It's
England in you.
fine. I did just a little bit of New England in
Just
me.
a little bit, baby.
Wish I had more in me.
Yeah.
We're gonna wrap it. Thank you guys so much
She's
for listening.
wicked.
For now, we are gonna say goodbye.
And good luck, y'all.
We'll catch you on the next one, guys. Bye.
Bye, creepers.